Can you think off the top of your head about something that happened in your life that was really unfortunate and maybe embarrassing, that was also really funny at the same time? Or maybe you could laugh at it now. Anybody got one of the things? Everyone's got that thing. Would you just turn to your neighbor and tell them what that thing is, just real quick? Just in a couple words, just let them know what that thing was. Unless it involved me, then be quiet. Okay. I have hundreds of stories like this. I like to laugh at myself, so everything's kind of funny. But two stories come right to my mind, real quick. And the first one involves my driving, and a lot of you guys know this story. Although I have many stories about my driving, so you're like, well, which one is it? I'm probably the only person you know who's been in 4 accidents, and 3 of them happened in a driveway. This is true. Where's my wife? She's like, amen. The first, look, you're supposed to wipe the snow off the windshield. Okay, I get it now. I mean, who knew? Shouldn't be trying to maneuver the car with the snow on. Okay, anyways. The first story occurred in the summer of 2014. Yeah, some of you were there. I was taking a group of kids on a mission trip to New York City. And we had a whole charter bus full of kids, a little Ford Explorer SUV. And I thought, well, I'll just drive the Ford Explorer. Get a little alone time, just me. And I, the church pulled out of the van pulled out of the church. You can see why I can't drive. The van pulled out of the church parking lot and went on its way. And I was like, well, I'll stop at my house. My house is right by the freeway. I'm like, I'll kiss my wife and pick up some stuff and say goodbye to my kids. And I don't know, the van, we probably had, 50 kids, but 60, I like to exaggerate. We'll call it 250 kids in that van. At least. It was a big van. Charter bus, actually, it was a charter bus. And so they're going off, and I started heading out to Cleveland on my way to New York City. And it was right about this time I got to Cleveland that I realized that Cleveland was not on the way to New York City. In fact, Cleveland was very much in the opposite direction of New York City. And I had this realization, and I called Aaron John. He was the guy playing the guitar singing right here. And I said, bro, turns out I'm in Cleveland. And what I got to hear was him say, hey, yo, Kyler's in Cleveland! And then all 250 kids laughed. And I still get reminded of this. That's why when I started talking about it, people were like, hey, I remember that. Guy's a fool. And the second example happened more recently. I told some of you guys about this one too. I was asked to perform a funeral. I did not know the man. And my wife knew the family, and they didn't have anybody to the funeral, so I'm like, I'll do it. And so I always try to be prepared. I want to be as prepared as I can whenever I'm going to speak. But I got up and I started talking, and the first thing you say is, we're here to celebrate the memory of. And when I said of, I said the guy's name wrong. I mispronounced the name in a really kind of bad way. And everyone started laughing at me. 75 people all just started laughing. I've never been so embarrassed. I was totally horrified. I had one job, right? I had one job. And so here's what I did. I said, I'm sorry. I will send a new minister your way momentarily. And I started doing this. And they started laughing. I'm like, oh, they might like me. I went back and I finished up. Now, these things are pretty embarrassing. They're obviously kind of funny. And both of them had some consequences. People think I'm an idiot, right? I do that really well, honestly. I can't help it. Just things happen to me. And that's what people think. And there's consequences. There's just nothing I can do about it. But you know what? It really wasn't that bad. The fact is that I can laugh about it, and that you can laugh about your little story that you told, means it really wasn't that big of a deal. And friends, I'm just kind of thankful for them, because now I know when I'm doing a funeral, I'm going to call the funeral director and say, okay, say the name, right? And I'm going to like record it so I know how to say it. And I'm going to try to go the right direction when I drive. No, I'm not even going to try. It's not going to happen. But I'm thankful for these stories because I learn stuff and it gives me content for my sermons, okay? And it's always fun to laugh at ourselves, amen? You got to laugh. But as we all know, there are other kinds of stories. Stories that we can't laugh at. Stories that we can share that talk about how life can be really, really, really difficult and not funny at all. Like there's stories I have that just aren't funny, will never be funny. And some stories we have are hard and they're heartbreaking and we can feel totally overwhelmed and lost and not sure what to do. Every single person has been in this spot, and as I say that, you're bringing back 3, 4, 5, 6 examples. Something's coming to mind, something that you're in today, something you were in 2 weeks ago, something you were in 6 years ago, something's coming back. You know what I'm talking about. And as I was preparing this message, I tried to think about some examples that happened in my life, and again, 2 came to mind. The first was just a couple months ago, it was right around my birthday, and I was helping my family clear out my grandparents' house before the sale. They had to sell the house. My grandparents had recently passed away, and the house had to be sold. And my family members weren't well enough to be there to help. And so I was in this house, and I was responsible for moving things out. And this is 90 years of memories. My grandparents were both in their 90s when they died. And 90 years of memories and accumulation and trinkets and books and furniture and pictures and memories and things that were really important to me and things that were really important to my family and things that were certainly really important to my grandparents. And I was by myself. I had a small moving truck. This house was full of stuff, and I only had a little bit of time, right? I had about 6 hours. So I had to decide what I was going to keep and what I was going to leave in the house to throw away, okay? And here's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. There's these little pairs of shoes on the shelf. A little pair of shoes that my grandparents lost a child. Baby was less than 1 year old, and they had these pairs of shoes bronzed. And I'm like, how can I let that go in the garbage? And this house was full of things like that, full. And so I had this pressure and this stress to go through this stuff and take things that were important, knowing that whatever I left was going to go in the trash. And I remember calling Andrea, and she was working, but she's like coaching me through. She's like, okay, make sure you get this and do this, and it's going to be okay. And just, and Elijah came to help me, and we got through it. I did what I could, I did the best I can, and we got through it. But it was one of the worst feelings I had ever had in my entire life. I felt helpless. I felt like I was going to disappoint my grandparents. I know that's silly, but I just felt like I never felt before. But that wasn't the worst I had ever felt. I think the worst what I ever felt was this moment I remember when I was 12 years old, and my stepfather, good guy, he called me into the kitchen, and he sat me down at the table, and he said, Aaron, I need to talk to you. And I knew something was wrong. And I said, is it about my dad? And you could see that he was sad. Like you could see that he was troubled. And he said, yes. And I said, is he dead? And he said, yeah, he is. He's dead. And a lot of you know what that feels like, right? Like you remember what it feels like to hear of the passing of someone that you love or some tragedy striking someone who's near to you. And that could be a child, it could be a parent. And for me, I remember even at 12 years old, the wind being knocked out of me, right? Just feeling totally overwhelmed and crushed. And I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And in moments like that, it just seems like there's no way out, right? Because you just know, when you're a 12-year-old little boy and your dad's gone, like life's not going to be the same for you. Like it seems like nothing's ever going to be okay again. And we know that when we get there, we get in that pit. We can't see any hope or resolution. We feel like our lives are hopeless and we feel like there's no way out. And I know that every one of us have felt that way at least one time in their lives and probably dozens of times. Sometimes I think about the great thing about having a huge family. And if you're new to Ultra Church, my wife and I have at least 8 kids. I'm pretty sure it's 8. and we have a big family, and that's you have there's an exponentially larger opportunity for joy. That was a mouthful, but there's also an exponentially larger opportunity for grief, right? You got that trade-off. And so I know that I will face grief in my life, and you know, as you sit there, that you will too. Like you've probably already experienced it 1,000,000 times in your life. And the question is, when these things come, the question is, why? Like, how did I get here? Why am I facing this? Where's God in this? And sometimes, and this is something I would always tell, when I was a youth pastor, I would tell the teens this a lot, sometimes the why is us, right? Like we're like something that we did. Like the reason that we're in trouble is because of us, right? The reason we're suffering is because of us. God doesn't have much to do with it. It's us, like why did this happen to you? Well, you started smoking crack and you robbed that guy and then you stabbed someone in prison. Like God didn't do that. You did that. Well, I don't want to have a baby. Like, why this happened to me? Well, you know why. You didn't trip and fall. Like, you did this, right? Like this is what happens when you do the thing that you did, right? So sometimes, amen, thank you. So sometimes this is what happens when we put ourselves in certain situations. A lot of the times, the pit is our fault. You made a bad choice. We've all done that. You lied. We've all done that. You got caught. We've all done that. And now we are living in the pit that comes along with it. But sometimes we get pushed in the pit, right? We haven't done anything wrong. Like we haven't done anything to deserve the space that we're in. I didn't deserve to anything. Like I didn't deserve to have my father die when I was 12 years old. I didn't do that. Okay, I didn't. That wasn't my fault. That's nothing I could have done about that. Some of the details of my childhood, it's not my fault. I didn't do anything. You didn't do anything to deserve your illness. You didn't do anything to deserve him leaving you or you getting laid off or you losing your insurance or having a sick kid. And yet here you are living in that reality. So what do we do when we get there? How the heck do we scale the pit when we feel like we don't know how we got there? And even if we do know how we got there and it's all our fault, and we desperately want to get out, how do we do it? I think the book of Jonah has some answers for us. So let's focus on that text this morning, starting in Jonah chapter 2. First, some context from last week. God is asking Jonah to travel to a place called Nineveh. It's a very large city in the Assyrian Empire. And if you read Jonah chapter 1, he's like, Jonah, you got to get up and go now. And Jonah's like, aye. And Jonah, and we talked about this last week, it's like Jonah's in Akron, and God wants him to go to Rochester, and he goes all the way to San Francisco, okay? Like he's going the opposite direction, long way away. Why does he refuse to go? Because Jonah is suspicious that God is going to save the hearts of like 200,000 people, and he doesn't like those people, so he doesn't want them to be saved, okay? So he's running in the opposite direction. And he gets on a ship, and God pursues him. And God brings on this storm to shake him out of his boat. And so Jonah ends up in the sea. And he is swallowed by what the Bible calls a large fish. Now, just a little time out. Let's put this over here for a second. How do we know how to read this? Is it history or a metaphor? Let me just tell you how I see this. Jesus makes mention of Jonah in the Gospels as something that's historical fact. Jesus establishes his own credibility by predicting his death and rising from the dead, and that's what he did. So to view the story as a metaphor implies that Jesus is either dishonest or doesn't know what he's talking about. So just for me, like I'm gonna assume that the guy who predicted his death and resurrection and did in fact die and rise from the dead is right. So that's kind of how that's like my train of thought, okay? So that's where I'm gonna be on this. However you wanna read it is up to you, okay? So Jonah is in the belly of this large fish. He is in a pit of his own doing. And if you've read this story, or you were here last week, you see all the things that led up to this. As I said last week, God was encouraging him to go in one direction, and Jonah goes all the way in the other direction. He ran away. He refused to do his part in changing the hearts of 200,000 people in Nineveh. What if God's like, hey, I want you to go change the lives of 200,000 people, and I'm going to equip you, and when you go, it will be done. You're going to be like, yeah, man, that sounds great. Not Jonah. He's like, I hate those people. And when he did this, he was not remorseful. He hid, and now he's facing the consequences, and he starts to complain about it. And that's what we're going to pick up in Jonah chapter 2, verse 3. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. Now, sometimes we read a text like this, and especially in the Psalms, and the author's using dramatic imagery to try to convey a point. And maybe this point would be some good imagery about desperation or grief. But in this case, I mean, like, okay, you hurled me into the depths. It's the very hearts of the sea, and the current swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. Like, does this sound like it could be like an Aerosmith power ballad? Boys to Men, Tony Braxton. I mean, like, this is something from the 90s, right? Talking about some girl or something, right? But this happened to Jonah. Like, he's talking about something that actually happened to him. God, you threw me into the sea, and it was deep, and there were waves, and they were sweeping over me. In verse 5, the engulfed waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me, seaweed wrapped around my head. Jonah says, I'm engulfed by water. It's everywhere. The boat that I was in is gone. Those people are out of here. And it's a point where I'm about to drown. I got seaweed wrapped around my anybody ever have seaweed wrapped around your face? That doesn't sound like it's pleasant. Now, I've been sad before. I've been heartbroken. But I've never come to the point of being near death after having rebelled against God in a really bad and deep way. So what Jonah is describing is real, and it sounds terrible. And what he's going through at this point is worse than anything I've ever faced in my own life, for certain. And remember, Jonah has sold everything he owned to get on that ship. As we talked about last week, the ticket to that ship was extremely expensive. He had to sell his house to get on that ship. And he's running away, and he's running away from all his problems, running away from God, and he's invested everything into that decision to leave. And now he has nothing. In fact, in verse 6, it looks like what he's describing is that sensation of drowning. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. I'm going deep. The earth beneath barred me in forever. It's like the doors are closing, okay? And if you ever like had a near-death experience before, you've ever felt like you were going to drown before, maybe you know what this feels like. But maybe if you've had a near-death experience or felt like you were going to drown, you could understand what it means to maybe have a whale come swallow you at the same time. Like, it doesn't seem like that'd be great. Anybody ever had a near-drowning experience? Anybody? I did. When I was about 7 years old, I had these really terrible babysitters who took me swimming, but my mom didn't know. Screen your babysitters, parents. Don't let them take your kids to the lake. You gotta get one of them GoPros or something, like cameras, and follow them around. Because I almost drowned. I was falling in the water, and I was like, oh my gosh, where is everybody? And I almost took that breath, but then someone came and scooped me up right in the nick of time. Now, what if instead of someone scooping you up when you're about to drown, it's an animal coming to eat you? And this is what Jonah is living through. And now he's in the belly of a whale, and the pit gets deeper. And sometimes, as we know, we go through life, trial is compounded by another trial. And ever happened to you before? Like, things are bad, and they just kind of get worse. Like, you broke, and then your car gets broke, right? Like you got nothing, and then something happens that requires a lot of something. Or you're sick, and you break your leg. Like sometimes life doesn't give you any breaks. If you're my friend on Facebook, you saw this happen to my family for 2 solid months. In late November, we started getting this round of this gross GI stuff. Everyone was puking and pooping. It was the worst. Welcome to Altered Church. You haven't been to church in a while, and you're like, this is what church has become? So this is what happened to my family, right? It was puking and pooping. And not everybody at the same time, thank God. But then again, it lasted for like 2.5 weeks. It was terrible. And then we got better, and then the flu kicked in, right? It was like muscle aches and coughing and fevers. Everybody had a fever. It was terrible. Even I had a fever. Thank you for your prayers. I almost died. Made it out. Then right at the end, like everyone's feeling better, Andrea wakes up and she's 7.5 months pregnant, and there's this blood everywhere. We're like, oh my gosh. And so we go to the doctors, and the doctor's like, you're gonna have this baby today, probably, and you're very early, and your placenta could be torn. We don't really know, and we don't really know what's gonna happen to the baby, and we're scared. And so we go and we have this baby, and the baby's healthy, thank God, but the baby had to stay in the hospital for a while, and it's just stressful. And then one of the days that we're in the hospital, my daughter Azariah has a seizure, and she has to go to the hospital via ambulance. My children were home with her. They had to call the ambulance. And it was like one thing after another. It was terrible. And as you hear this, and by the way, 6 weeks later, everyone's happy and healthy and everyone's fine. God is good. Amen? All right. Just don't try to kiss me. You might still get sick. And I'm married. Unless you're my wife, you can kiss me. Now, there's people in this room who are like, that's not even bad. Like, that's nothing. That's easy. And you're right. Like, that's, for some people, the story like that is nothing. It's easy. But the point is, when we're going through stuff and things keep piling on, it's no fun to live through, right? Like, it's no fun when things keep getting worse and worse and worse, and you got to deal with life and still keep going. And this is where Jonah's at. Life keeps getting more and more complicated. The pit keeps getting deeper, and hope keeps getting further and further and further out of sight. Now this is you. What do you do? What do you do when life keeps getting worse and problem keeps piling on top of problem? Well, first, we have to have the right perspective. Understand that the pit isn't always where you think it is. Sometimes what we perceive as the pit isn't really the pit, but it's the path after the pit. Sometimes what we perceive as the pit is the path after we've ascended out of the pit and God has delivered us from the pit. Sometimes we see ourselves in the pit when in reality we should be looking back on where we used to be. And God's already delivered us. Here's what I mean. We skip right over these verses 1 and 2. Here's what they say. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord, his God. He said, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. Now, if you're reading this and you're paying attention, you see that Jonah is in the fish. He's already in the fish when he's saying this. And he says, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. That's past tense, right? I was distressed, but you rescued me. I called for help, and you answered me. That's past tense, right? Past tense? Mm-hmm. And look what he says at the end of verse 6. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. So let's try to just get this straight. All this complaining that Jonah is doing about the waves and the seaweed and almost drowning isn't Jonah complaining. It's him describing his previous condition before God saved him. Now, what you might say is, well, God put him in the water, but Jonah would know God put him in the water because Jonah was running away from God. What God was doing was saving him by getting him out of the boat and into a condition where he had to rely on the providence of God. And this is what he did. How did God save him? With the fish. With the fish. Now for Jonah, being in the belly of the fish wasn't the pit. Like if I'm in the belly of a fish, I would be like, this is the worst. I don't like this. But Jonah recognized It was his salvation. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. I was drowning and sinking into the consequences of my own mistakes. I was running from the opportunity to save 200,000 hearts over in Nineveh. I was running from the opportunity of experiencing my life's purpose. And you had to shove me out of that boat. And you put me in the water. And you rescued me even though I didn't deserve it. You saved me from the pit and brought me into your rescue. Now, I think that sometimes we think that we are in the pit, but we've already been rescued. We think that we're doomed and we're hopeless. We think that we're lost, but God has already given us a way out that we aren't seeing or we aren't taking advantage of or we're closing ourselves off to, because we're so busy focusing on where we've been or what we've done or the impact of our consequences or our circumstances that we can't see what God has already done and what he's already saved us from. When I was younger, it's Pastor Aaron's story time. This is like my 4th story today. You know, when I don't have a lot of good sermon content, I start telling stories. But when I was younger, and yes, one time when I was younger, I was a well-known user and abuser, right? I was a mess. And shaping up to be just like my father, right? That's the path I was on. But when I turned my life around, and I got married, and I found a career, age 20, got married super young, no one would believe that it was gonna last. He's gonna mess it up, the guy's a screw up. When I had a child and found Jesus and decided to give my life in service to Christ at a very young age, no one thought I would follow through. That guy's a screw up. Why would they say that? Because I had proven it to be true. I spent a great portion of my life as a screw up, and I had hard work to do, a lot of spade work to do to get out of the consequences of those choices. But the consequences weren't the pit. I had a lot of work to do to change my reputation, okay? The pit is when I was putting things into my body that could have killed me. The pit is when I was stealing from my family and friends. The pit is when I was barely avoiding death and jail. So what? I had to face the consequences of building a bad reputation, but that was nothing. Fixing that was about time and work and obedience to God. But sometimes we can look at our life and see the current conditions or the consequences of our actions as the pit, when the reality is God has already rescued us from the pit. He's already given us salvation. He's already given us a new lease on life. And he's already given us a new beginning. And yes, I may still live in the consequences of the mistake I made, but at least I'm not the same person I used to be. And at least I'm not in the same place that I was. And here's why that perspective matters. If I always think that I'm in the pit, I'm always going to have a pit mentality, right? If I always think that things are always lost or wrong or broken, then I'm always going to be blind to God's provision and his rescue and his grace. If I keep saying things are broken, things are wrong, I'm not going to see the glory of God and the grace and the provision and the miracles he's putting in my life because I'm so busy thinking about that pit and where I used to be. Being out in the sea, or out of the sea, was being out of the pit for Jonah. And yes, he was in the belly of a whale, and no one wants to be there, but he knew that he wasn't where he started at, and God was taking him to someplace new. And because of this, he said, but you, Lord, my God, brought my life up from the pit. Yeah. Now, some of us are living in grace and salvation, having a new lease on life, a second chance, a new opportunity, rescued from the pit of danger and despair and desperation. But our minds are still back where we used to be. Our attitude is still back where we used to be. Our thoughts are still back where we used to be, and we'll tell anybody who wants to listen about how bad it is, how bad it was, how bad it's always gonna be. And we're not seeing where we could be. We're not seeing where we could be saving 200,000 souls in Nineveh because we're stuck back there in a pit that we don't even live in anymore. We're not seeing where we could be. We're not seeing where we could be. And this has been me, and it could be you, if you're always talking about how bad things are, how tough your life is, and you start speaking in absolutes, like always, and never, and always, and never. They always look at me like that. They never treat me well. It always happens to me this way. God never does this for me. They are always unkind. They never love me. That's pit talk. That is the language from the pit. And I'm going to tell you what, you keep talking like that, you're going to make it come true. And you're going to put yourself in a pit that God already got you out of. We don't want to live there. And chances are God's already taken you out. So stop putting yourself there with your language and your talk and your attitude and your mentality. God may have delivered us from the pit, may have delivered me from the pit and given me a new purpose, but I can't see it and I can't see him because my mind is and my attitude is back there where I used to be. So instead of saying always and never, they always mistreat me. They never give me a chance. Instead of saying always and never, we have to reorient our minds to seeing God's goodness and sovereignty in the face of trouble. Now, here's how we're going to change that. Things aren't easy, but God is good in my troubles. Now, this is honesty, okay? It's not rose-colored glasses. It's not being delusional. It's being honest. Life is still hard, but God is still and always good. Mm-hmm. It takes me and my needs and my perspective and my hurts away from the front of the line and puts God there. And it says in humility, I don't know what's happening, but I know you're in charge and I'm going to go along with you. Or we can change our language and say something like, I'm not where I want to be, but praise God, I'm not where I used to be, right? Amen. Who can say that? We can all say that. I can say that. And how about this one? And I think this one is probably the most important. I still feel the pain, but I can see his plan. It still hurts, but I can see him in the hurt. And I know there's a plan in the hurt. It's not wrong to feel bad, but it's wrong to stay there and sit there and cross your arms and not move because you don't really believe that God is good enough to move you. But guess what? That's the pit, and you ain't there anymore. And this is important when we are out of the pit and looking ahead. But it's also important when we are stuck right in the center of it. When the hurt is fresh, when I'm still stuck in my mistakes, when my breath is taken away because of my grief, when I've been caught, when I've been exposed, when I've seen what I've done or what they've done to me and the consequences of it for the first time, when she just left or I just got fired, that's the pit. Like that is the pit. But I want you to know two important things about this space. Two important things about this space and how to get out of it. One is an action, and one is an attitude. First, the action. And as I was going over my notes this morning, I thought, man, Aaron, you messed up. You should have made your entire sermon about this. This should have been it. God forgive me, this should have been it. But look at verse 7. Jonah is talking about those moments in the sea. Those moments he thought he was going to die. Look at the action he took. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord. And my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. His action, his response was prayer. His response to the pit was prayer and praise. Now, I don't know what put you where you are, right? Because there's a pit. I know some people are sitting in it. I know some people should know they're beyond it. Okay, and I don't know what put you there. But I know it's not easy, because I know when I get there, it sucks, okay? Like, it's awful. Like anxiety and just your body, man, it does weird things, right? When you feel like that, like everything is wrong and nothing seems right. And I don't know how you got there. And I do know it's not easy. You may be a long way off and have a long way to go, and help might seem like a long way off. But one thing I'm certain of is that God will hear you. I love when Jesus, he says, if a father or a son asks his father for a piece of food, will he give him a scorpion? Of course not. So why would I ignore you in your need when you pray to me? I wouldn't. God will hear you. And God will answer you. And sometimes it doesn't look the way you expect it. Sometimes it's a challenge. Sometimes it's a person saying no. Sometimes it's a person saying yes. Sometimes it's a hug. Sometimes it's a letter in the mail from a stranger. Sometimes it's that feeling you get when you're reading that piece of scripture and you're like, man, God is good, and you get on your knees, right? Have you had that happen to you? I have. Or you're in church and you just hear that song, or see that lyric and you're like, God he's a way maker, and I need a way, and he's made a way, and you just know in that moment he's there. That's how he hears. That's how he answers. Now here's how that attitude part kicks in. Getting out of the pit and thriving on the other side of the pit means that the pit might be part of the plan. Did you hear that? The pit might be part of the plan. Now for Jonah, getting tossed out of the boat, feeling helpless in the ocean, was the factor that was going to move him from wasting his life running away from God to turning back and saying, okay, here we go, Nineveh. I'm not going to like it, and he won't. We'll get there. But I'm going to go. Sometimes the pit is the plan. And God will do this. He'll place us in positions of discomfort in order to move us out of our distress and our turmoil. Now, other times we don't need any help getting shook up, right? Like we just do that on our own. We make a mess of our own lives. But God uses the circumstances. He uses the pit to bring us back around to him. And this is why our attitude and the things that we say are so important. Because when we start saying, like, I can't believe I'm in this spot, and I can't believe all this is happening to me, and I can't believe they're treating me like that. Do you know what you're doing? You may be cursing the sovereignty of God and the people that God is using to change you and turn you back, but you can't see it because you're too busy complaining and feeling sorry for yourself. Stop. Stop doing that. Because the pit might be part of the plan. And as I say that, everyone's like, oh no, that's me. That's okay. That's okay. Because guess what? He loves us all the way through it. From the call, to the fall, to the rebellion, to the mistakes, to the repenting, and over and over and over and over and over and over. And I can keep saying over for the rest of my life on this stage, and you'll probably leave after I do it about 20 times, but that's how many times God will forgive you and go through this with you. He loves us enough to see us through it. He loves us enough to guide us through it. He loves us enough to change us through it. Now, we're gonna worship here, and we're gonna have communion in a moment. But before we do that, can we just pray together? Can you stand and can we pray together? And maybe you're here for the first time. Maybe you don't know who Jesus is. Maybe you're new to this church thing, but I want you to try something with me, okay? I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to put your hands, just raise them up about 6 inches away from your waist. Palms up. No one's looking at you. No one cares if you do it. It's okay. Just you and God. And I want you to repeat after me. 3 phrases, okay? Repeat after me so that I can hear you, so your neighbor can hear you, because maybe they're discouraged and maybe they need to hear it from you. Maybe they came with you and they know how discouraged you are. And when they hear it from you, it's gonna encourage their hearts. And they've been saying, God, where are you at? I can't see you. And it's you saying these words that will motivate them to get out of the pit. I just want you to repeat after me. God, I see you in the pit with me. I know you will rescue me, because I know you are good. Yes. Stay where you're at. In saying these things, what we've done is we've acknowledged God's plan for us in the pit. We've acknowledged his love for us to sustain and protect us. And we've acknowledged that he is worthy of our love, even in the middle of our struggle. Let me pray a blessing over you. Father, your love for us is deep and it is immense. And even as we are standing here saying, God, you must love me, we have no idea of the depths of your love and devotion. It pleases you and pleases your heart to see us wanting to know and love you. And so what I ask God in this moment is the strength for us to see you, the strength for us to know you, the strength for us to move forward and to move on and not look back, the strength for us to cast our burdens and anxieties and cares on you and say, Jesus, take it all. And as our arms are stretched out, we are handing it over to you. We trust you. We need you. We love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let's worship together, church.